everyone, and welcome to the third keynote webinar of today's Marketing Showcase Online. Thank you so much for joining us again. Whether this be your first presentation of the day or you checked into our first two, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Before we get into the presentation today, which is Grandad Digital's talk on problem to opportunity, solving issues with your website, which is presented by Will and Paul from Grandad, I just want to run you through a few little bits on Zoom and how we're using today's webinar. I'm sorry if I'm teaching you to suck eggs, or I've already said this in one of the earlier webinars. I'll rattle through it nice and quick. So we have the chat function on there. And as always with our webinars, if you could give me a little hello so I know you're there, that would be great and everything's working okay. You can use the chat to speak to me. I'll be in there throughout the presentation, having a little ramble to myself more than likely, or you can use it to talk to your colleagues. Separate to that, we have the Q&A function, which is where you'll ask questions which I'll store for the end of the session, and I'll ask them on your behalf to Will and Paul. That's always fun. So just be thinking throughout the presentation, if there's anything specific to your business or anything that it props up, pop them in the Q&A, and I'm happy to ask those to the guys at the end of the presentation today. So you're in for a good one. The session's 30 minutes long, including that question and answer session. So make sure you've got your coffee nice and piping hot. That's the way I like it. And we'll get underway. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Paul and Will to the stage.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Will. Hi, Paul. Enjoy the session, guys, and I'll let you get underway.
Thank you, Ashley. Well, welcome, everybody. Nice to have you with us today. As the clock is ticking, I'm just going to get started on our presentation. So, okay, hopefully everybody can see that. So, we wanted to take you through our talk today just to understand about what is your website doing. Okay, often people come to us and they're the idea of sorry, just apologies, 2 seconds, just note. Often people come to us with a problem and they have the idea of what's going on with the bounce rate. Why is my website not performing? And they often think about having to potentially throw everything away and start again. And what we would like to do is we'd like to take you through some quick wins, some steps you can take as your team that allow you to get understanding of what's happening, use those processes we use on a daily basis, and hopefully take something away with you that you can use within your team to help you move forward. Okay. At Grandad, we are a digital agency. We love delivering business growth through digital customer engagement. That's our passion. We love getting involved with your customers and your users and understanding what they do. And ultimately, whilst working for you, we're focusing on your customers' needs and goals. And if we can focus on needs and goals, we can deliver great results. And that's an analogy that actually I think a lot of you can take away to your marketing teams yourselves. Think about your users, think about what they're wanting to do and how they are behaving within your website. Hopefully, many of you may have joined us in September. We did a talk on introducing our garden analogy, and we actually wanted to use today's talk to actually just take that on a little bit further. Think about how you might use that garden analogy to actually make improvement. So hopefully you may have set up your own data dashboard, and actually you may have noticed that some things are not performing. Some areas of your website are feeling a little bit underloved, a little bit underworked, and maybe that garden analogy where they may be, growing well, but prosperous, but just a little bit weedy, a little bit underloved, not performing. So what we're going to do today is take you through the steps that we use on a daily basis to try and resolve some of those issues you may be facing. Our first part of what we normally do is a discovery process. Now, this is something that ideally every agency should be doing while working with you. Okay, it does look quite scary. There's many processes, and actually it's not too bad. It does flow through. But idea of this process, it's about getting understanding of your audience, what's happening with the website, what's happening with the content, how are users feeling, how are users engaging as they go through from that journey of engaging with your website. Now, as I said, many agencies should follow this process, and it's something that if you have an understanding of what's going on, you can then start those conversations, having a more informed engagement conversation with your agency, or even just in your internal teams, to deliver better results within your website.
So for the purposes of the talk today, we're going to set the case study of Karen. She works for a charity organisation. She's the marketing manager there. And we're just going to work through the process as we were her and her team. She's having a problem with bounce rates. There's an upward trend where it's continuously going up. She doesn't know what's going on. She's identified a problem through the data analytics she's been gathering. And we're going to walk through each of the different steps that Karen can take without necessarily a third-party agency being involved, that will help her shape a brief or a change that will hopefully solve the problem in the future. So it's a step-based process. So if we navigate to step 1, we're going to start a little bit around focusing on what the goals and objectives are of these blogs for Karen. And it's a really vital step when you're looking at anything that is content based on your site, is what is its objective? Why do we create this content? Why is it there? Why does it exist? Why do we create it every Friday, every Tuesday, whatever it might be? Objectives could be something quite large and grander, like might just be brand awareness, might be increasing engagement with your audience, it might be to provide more conversions, but make sure you have an objective set for why you are creating this type of content. And it doesn't have to just be blogs. Every piece of content on your site should have a very clear objective of why it's there and what it is there to do. You then dig into the content a little bit more with the actual goals that the content needs to achieve. Now, people often get goals and objectives confused. We treat them as two different entities. A goal is, what do we want the user to actually achieve on the page? It could be we want them to click a blog, perhaps. It might be clicking a CTA for one of your services or your products. It might be just starting the purchasing process. There can be many different goals and they all come into different forms. And a piece of content might have many goals in play all at the same time, but make sure you know what this content is there for with the objective, and then what is it that you're actually expecting the user to do. Think about the language of goals. Look at how Google Analytics treats goals. It is an action. Okay, it's really important. And then sort of the last final check everybody wants to sort of be rolling through is take a step back a second. You've identified the problem. Karen's identified that her bounce rate is going up, but just check to see if that actually is a problem. And that's a really sort of vague, silly term to sort of throw out there. But sometimes the industry as a whole will say a high bounce rate is an issue and you need to be worried about it and you need to do this and you need to do this with your agency and this, that, and the other. But actually take a step back and look at your site in its actual situation and go, is a bad bounce rate a problem here? Now, very common scenario where you might have a big ecosystem of sites where you're taking users from site to site to site. Remember how analytics are going to treat that unless it's been set up correctly. They might be triggering a bounce when actually you're just sending them through to an external site. So just reaffirm that this is actually a problem that needs addressing. And then you move on to the next stage. Excuse me, there's a cat.
There's the cat. Welcome to the cat. Right. So thinking about Karen and what she's doing, she's done her work. She's got that idea of what her goals and what she's trying to achieve. Ultimately, now she needs to consider where that content within the information architecture. Okay, so we use a lot of buzzword bingo, information architecture, IA as we refer to it. So where do the blogs fit within the site? How are users going to find those blogs? How are they going to see where they are in the structure? Are they buried? Are they easy to find? Are they linked to from other areas? So all of these things will allow the content to either be found or not found. It's very simple, but if the content can't be found by the user and by Google, no one's going to read it. So look at where they are, and if you can, start to draw it out. Okay, and this is a simple exercise, and you can either do it with Excel or with post-it notes or just a piece of pen and paper. But mapping out that structure allows you to get an idea of where things are. Now, often people come to us and we find that they've buried content many levels down. Think about how you can group content together and where it is. Okay, and make it easy. Make it easy for things to be found, things to be discovered, and then your users' journeys can go on that. Also think about other metrics, other ways of engaging in the content. Do they need to rely on a search? Do they have to use your site search to find your content? It's not great. It's a good tool, but it shouldn't be relied upon. So once you've got those steps and you've mapped it out, you then get a bigger picture and you can move on to the next step.
So step 3, and you'll start to see when, as an agency, the way that we approach this, we encourage our clients to approach this, is very methodical and very detailed. And often at times we can identify an issue and actually go and not check the basics. And often the basics can actually be the root stem of the problem. And a few core things that every page, if it is a particular page, it's your navigation or whatever it might be, is check it across these key themes. Check it on mobile. Look at the way that the users are starting to engage with mobile devices, iPads, etc. If you're offering a really poor experience on a mobile device, that might be actually the reason why this problem has arisen. You know, if Karen's blogs aren't working on mobile, of course the users aren't going to be engaging with them. They're going to bounce. Check it for accessibility. So accessibility has been very hot in the industry for the last 2 years due to legislation reasons coming in. Make sure you are supporting all of your users. We're a big believer in that. Regardless of the user's challenges or needs of engaging with a site, are you making sure you're meeting that required standard that you're setting? Security, it's a massive one that's often ignored. Have you got a valid security certificate active? Have you got an insecure flag that's been applied to your site? Are you linking to insecured sites? Just run it through one of these free tools that we've got on the right hand side, and it will give you just a top line picture of what might be going on. Site speed, big one. Don't assume that everybody's on Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is a great way of covering up very sloppy performance on websites. Imagine you are on the tube and you've got 1 bar of signal when you're trying to access that web page. It should still load. It will take a little bit of time, obviously, but make sure the user isn't waiting to engage with your content. SEO, really important. Run it through an SEO tool. Make sure you've got all of the core fields and requirements set, alt text, meta descriptions, all of those kind of things. So make sure you check those. And then the second part of your sort of auditing MOT process is read it, engage with the content. Take a step back and read it as one of your users. Maybe get a colleague to read it for you. Read it top to bottom. Is it legible and engaging? Is it structured? So many times we deal with content challenges, and the content is really good, but it's just not structured properly. We're not using paragraphs and H2s and H3s correctly. Are you overwhelming the user with too many links? So we're big believers that if you offer up too much choice for the user, that can actually be very overwhelming, and the user doesn't know where to go or where to click or where to engage. Do your images match your narrative? It's a very common problem, especially if you've got a very controlled brand. You often don't have as much freedom with your assets, so you often pull from the same assets every time. But if they're not matching the narrative of what you're talking about, are they actually serving a purpose to embellish the content? Are you joining up the user flow? So really important. Users, we do a lot of screen recordings. Users tend to scroll to the bottom and then to the top to give them a little bit of a grounding of where they are. Are you joining that user flow up? In Karen's case, maybe providing more blogs that are related to the one that she shared on social, perhaps, and not just providing somebody the footer as the end destination. As a marketing manager or anyone who's doing web comms, if you're relying on your footer, you're probably failing and you need to be adding in some more in links. Overusing jargon and frightening users. Now, very industry specific here, but you've got to make sure that the language that you're using is not internal and is appropriate for any audience that is coming to your site that you're looking to target. Using the same words too often. What do I mean by that? You know, you're using a lot of the same words to explain the same things. Try and mix it up a little bit, some of your connectives and all of that kind of stuff. And then we move on to the step 4.
Okay, so with all those steps in place, you now got a good understanding of what's happening within your blogs. Now, this is a step we use, a process we use to measure the feeling, holistic, can't say it, analysis of the site in general. Okay, and it's a really valid, interesting tool behavior to go through. It works by basically pretending that you're a user. Okay, think about, you've got your IA, you've got an understanding of what's working with the content and where it is. Think about your users and the steps that they might go through to go from A to B to C to D. So we call those jobs to be done. Okay, so those steps could be anything. It could be about landing on the homepage, finding the blog in question, reading it, maybe reading another one, and then signing up to get the newsletter, and then they're disappearing. Okay, so that's the user journey that you might want to test. Okay, you follow that on your own website, and you mark yourself the emotional feeling that you are having as happy or sad on a chart. Okay, so imagine we're reading Karen's blogs, and I'm looking for a product. I can't find the product I'm looking for, I'm going to feel sad. Okay. Or I found the product I'm looking for, I'm feeling happier. They now don't have my size, I'm feeling sadder. Or I add to the basket and I don't know where the basket is. Where's it gone? I can't find it on the web page. I'm feeling sadder again. Or I add it to the basket and it's gone through really seamlessly and I'm automatically taken to the checkout, making my life easy, that journey easy for me to engage with. So this analysis of happy, sad gives you an understanding and an idea of how your users are feeling. And that's really important because if we look after our users, they'll keep coming back. That's a really important thing. So mapping out these core user journeys across your site. Now they can be short, they can be long, but ultimately they need to be the right user journey for the task at hand. And it's actually quite a good idea to actually test different scenarios at different lengths just to get a feeling and then use that data as we move through to step 5.
And step 5 is really important. This is actually now about going, right, I've completed all of this research and all of this work. You now need to create an opportunity or a change or a project or whatever you want to call it. It's going to be making some form of change. It might be really small, it might be really large. You might make a drastic change across the blog sections. But the really important thing that I stress that every sort of web manager or anybody who's involved with sort of leading on the change for any of your websites, write the requirements down that tackle each of your element of discovery specifically. So out of this process, you have identified individual items that need to be addressed. Write them down specifically. Don't just say, I want to change my blog section because it's not working. You've done all of this work at this stage. Make sure you get it down in detail. Look at your competitors. What are they doing? Are they doing anything well? Are they doing anything bad? Is there stuff that you like that they're doing? But look a little bit further beyond your competitors as well. Just look at sites that you like. Is it the design? Is it the flow? Is it the content approach? Images that they're using? Bring this all to the table. Prepare an internal working group to work through your ideas and your research. It's really, really important when you're doing anything that's research based. You have a working group that you can share your findings, discuss ideas, collaborate, because people, especially cross-functional teams, will have very different points of opinion that you will need before you actually fully flesh out this opportunity. List hypothesis, really important. I think this is happening because of X, Y, and Z, and you think it is happening because of all of the research stages you've done so far. And then sort of the second, if not final step before you've got that fully formed concept or brief for fixing this problem you've identified is get your colleagues involved, get your customers involved if you can. Go, look, this is what we currently think is going on. What do you think? What suggestions do you have? For instance, workshopping internally is a really great way of sharing your research and getting your colleagues' ideas forward in a structured setting. It doesn't need to be a big open free-for-all on opinion. It's very, very focused on what you found. And then lastly, you need to move to seizing your opportunity.
So we've flowed through those 5 steps quite quickly. But ultimately, in summary, the idea is at this point, now that you've done all of that work, okay, you've identified any problems you may have. Now we've focused in on Karen and blogs just because it was easier to convey that idea within this talk scenario. But this same process can happen on an e-commerce site, a whole, a big e-commerce store or a big marketing site, a B2B offering or B2, whatever it is, however big or small your web presence is, those 5 steps can be carried out, okay? And the same processes flow through. Just if the site's bigger, unfortunately, you've got a bit more work to do. But ultimately, once you've identified that problem, you can ultimately tick that element off, okay? Problems identified, I'm now going to work through and look at those goals and objectives, okay? Once those goals are in, always just keep hold of them. Don't forget them. Test everything as you go through, test against those goals. So as that, you might come up with a really fantastic idea for a new call to action within your blog template. Does it deliver on my goal? Does it deliver on those objectives? Okay. And that's really key to always keep going back to those. And as we said, that research stage is really important because that allows you to get a bigger picture of what's going on, allow you to get everything aligned into one place so that you've got the data you need to work forward through this process. And as Will mentioned towards the end there in step 5, that workshopping is really key as well. Okay, getting your colleagues involved, getting their input. You know, we're all users. We all use the web all day, every day. Okay. And those patterns have changed recently with everyone, a lot of people working from home. Those browsing patterns are changing. So actually that might be causing something that might be opening up a new opportunity for you, or looking at a different way of considering things. But by asking people around you who know the subject matter, you're actually doing a really good element of user testing, which is really powerful. And if you can open that up to your user groups and your customers and your audience, all the better. So ultimately that gets you through to writing a brief. Now, with that brief, that allows you to go to your internal teams, your external agency, whoever it may be, yourself if you're one person organization. But ultimately that brief gives you the idea of what you're trying to achieve. Now, we started this talk with an idea of a slightly underperforming garden following on from our previous one. Once everything's in place, hopefully you can get to a point where it's looking amazing, it's growing, it's flourishing, and it's coming through nicely. But don't stop there. Keep going, keep testing back against those goals, keep considering your users, keep considering how they are behaving, how they're performing, and looking at those pages and are they delivering on those goals and objectives. If you do that, you'll flourish. I'm hoping there's lots of questions. We've come through a little bit quickly. Ashley's got a poll. We are running a free consultation following this today that allows us to work with you individually, to have an amount of time where you can ask us specific questions. We can look at stuff for you. We can work through stuff and answer those questions you might have. And then we can go through those on that one-to-one sessions. But hopefully today, thank you for your time. I'm going to stop the share and hopefully there are some questions.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Will. Brilliant presentation there. Really enjoyed that one. Since you're talking September, I've had lots of feedback saying they loved how sort of in depth, and you know we're really covering some good ground there. So thanks again for taking the time to talk to us again today. I'm going to dive straight into questions. I've got a few of them, so let's try and get through them now. Talk to me about Google Speed Insights. So you know you can go onto Google. I think you mentioned it in your talk, and you can pop your website in, and it will say this is your speed score. One of the attendees has got a question based on the fact that it's a US tool, and that narrow bandwidth server it runs the test through causes it to be a bit unstable. Is that true? Have you found anything with that?
I think the sort of key answer there, and where we often use Google Site Speed is just the initial review that we'll do on a site speed. We're aware that it is based in the US. A majority of those servers are based in the US, and I always suggest, you know, we use a number of tools, GT Metrics, just trying to think of a number of other ones off the top of my head, but there are a load of tools that you should really be testing your site speed for, because you need a full picture of the performance across the world. You know, with the advent of cloud hosting and things like that, it gets around a lot of these problems. But for instance, if you're still getting a score of 10 on Google Site Speed, it's still going to be a problem, even if it's, you know, even if those servers are based in the US. The site speed is looking specifically of how your code is being constructed. Any bad JavaScript practices or anything like that, that is still a cause for concern. Don't look at the score necessarily so much, but actually look at the recommendations that the reports are giving you, and use as many tools as possible, and that will give you a very good picture on that.
Okay, cool. We've got loads of questions coming in here, so I'm going to try and whistle through as many as possible. So if we can keep the answers nice and sort of succinct, that would be great.
Sure.
No, that wasn't a long one. I'm just saying let's try and get through as many as possible. SEO tools recommend for a small business?
If you can, go on, Paul.
There you go.
I was just going to say, if you can find the budget for it, the likes of Moz and SEMrush really are the the top standard of what's out there. I think the key thing when it comes to choosing an SEO tool, you need to look at what's realistic for you as an organization. If you're only a one-man team or a couple, and you can only sort of dedicate a few hours to SEO once a month, don't go out and buy a tool that is going to give you all of the features and functionality. Go for something that's a lot more low level, isn't looking as detailed as perhaps some of those bigger tools are, because realistically you're not going to have the time to do all of the recommendations and changes that, you know, a full package solution from SEMrush will provide you, for instance. So have a look around, shop around. I'd need to know a little bit more about your specific situation to make a recommendation, but Moz and SEMrush are definitely the sort of industry standard that I would look to.
Okay, brilliant. I've got somebody that's asking about conversion, and I know it's a massive topic, sort of speaking about website conversion, but have you got any sort of top tips for making, you know, that our audience can take away to increase their website conversion?
Think about your users. Think about what are they thinking about when they're pressing that button, and whatever that button is, you know, say add to basket, whatever it is, or, you know, sign up to newsletter. Think about where it is on the page. You know, if you're asking someone to purchase something, don't hide the button, put it in front of them, you know, make it easy. We, as people online, we're lazy, okay, and we give up. So make it easy, make it clear, make it concise, and obviously would need to know more specifics about your scenario to give you a better idea. But I always say just put it in front of them. Keep it simple.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Advice about the look of creative websites. What works well? So if you've got a creative industry business, you know, how would you suggest that they set up their site? Should they be focusing on, you know, flashy designed website, or should it still have those core principles of converting in mind, or where do you sort of sit with that?
Sorry, so what was the first part? I broke up.
So one of the visitors is asking about, if you're a creative business or you're from the creative industries, what works well for that type of business in terms of website design? That's
always a tough one. You know, I've been doing this for years, and I think the showing your work online is always hard. Ultimately, the best place to show it is the destination. So if you're a creative company, I'd say just try and make your work look beautiful, and think about what are your users wanting to find out about you and what you've done. So making it clear, making it concise, and just taking them on the story. Maybe show them the narrative, the story you've been on to get to that end product.
Great, thanks very much. I think that's about it, actually, to be honest with you. There are a few questions that are left in the chat, but to be honest with you, Paul and Will, I'm going to pass those over to you separately. They're fairly industry specific, and I feel like if I was to ask them for you now, it wouldn't be fair, nor would it be representative of our full audience. So if I've missed your question, it's not, you know, it is on purpose, but I'm going to pass over the question to Paul so he can answer it in a little bit more detail at a later date. So look.
Sorry, I should just see one quick. I just see someone saying, why do we focus on a blog? I think it was just the idea of just trying to make it real for some people. That core process can be followed on big, full, massive websites or very industry specific, but we did a blog just to try and make it easy for people.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. I want to say thank you to Paul and Will for taking the time to present another webinar with us. I really enjoyed it, and I hope our visitors did as well. And obviously, thanks to all you attendees that checked in for our third webinar of the day. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us live. The presentation is recorded. I forgot to do that last time, so I had to get Paul and Will back on a call afterwards, but I'll send the recordings out later this week or perhaps early next week, to be honest with you. So we've got another couple of webinars left today. The next one is in 15 minutes. So please do grab a coffee and join me back here, and we'll be going live again in 15 minutes. So thanks very much, guys, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.